Welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going back to the 1600s, Jamestown. The settlement that, well, it had its ups and downs.
That's putting it mildly. I mean, everyone knows Jamestown was the first permanent English settlement, but wow, that word permanent hides a lot of drama.
It really does. Like, we think of colonists arriving in spring, sunshine, ready to build their new lives. But the Jamestown folks, not quite.
Not even close. Try late spring, during a mega drought. We're talking the driest conditions in centuries.
Seriously, how do we even know that from so long ago?
Tree rings. It's amazing scientists were able to analyze them and basically look back in time at the climate. Talk about a history detective story.
So Mother Nature was not exactly rolling out the welcome mat. You'd think with that kind of start, they'd at least have picked a good spot to ride out a drought.
If
Right?
you hope. But instead, swampy island, brackish water, mosquitoes. Not exactly the picture postcard, huh?
So we've got terrible timing, a not-so-great location. At least they came prepared, right? Skilled farmers, builders, all ready to make this wilderness work.
There's the thing. A lot of these early colonists were gentlemen, more used to giving orders than, say, actually building anything.
Wait, you mean instead of practical skills, they brought over, what, dreams of striking it rich?
Pretty much. And their supplies reflected that. They brought more stuff for finding gold than surviving.
No way. So who actually knew what they were doing?
Well, luckily, later on, they sent over German and Polish craftsmen in the second supply. Now, those folks had the skills to make a go of it.
See, this is what I love even in the middle of hardship, that thread of resilience. But what could they even make in Jamestown?
More than you'd think. They set up the first manufactories in the colony. And get this, glassware.
Glassware. In the middle of a swamp during a mega drought? That's wild.
Right. Not what you'd expect. But this wasn't just any glassware. It was exported back to Europe. Talk about resourceful.
So we've got these gentlemen colonists, right? And they're learning the hard way that surviving in the wilderness, well, it's not exactly a walk in the park. Add in the swamp situation, the drought, things probably didn't improve right away, huh?
You could say that. The winter of 1609, it's known as the starving time for a reason.
Starving time. Yeah, that's not a good sign. But it wasn't just a lack of food, was it? Things got a lot worse.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. Hunger, weakness, and then disease starts spreading. Suddenly, it's not about eating enough. It's just basic survival.
And on top of everything else, their relationship with the Powhatan Confederacy, the Native American tribes, it was strained. They were stuck in the middle of all these alliances and rivalries. Not an easy situation to navigate.
Really complicated. The colonists needed to trade with the Powhatan for food, especially in those early years. But how do you build trust when you're from completely different cultures, different languages, customs, and then you add the colonists' need for food and land? Yeah, recipe for tension.
So, starvation, disease, conflict with the Powhatan. It's kind of amazing Jamestown even made it. What turned things around?
Well, that's where a certain Captain John Smith comes back into the picture. You might know him as the Pocahontas guy.
Oh, right. But that story, it's more fiction than fact, right?
Let's just say there are different interpretations. But the important thing is what Smith wrote to the investors back in London, the Virginia Company. That letter changed things.
Okay, so this letter, a turning point. What did he say?
He told it like it was. He laid out the colony's problems.
Mm-hmm.
The need for practical people, not just those gentlemen out to get rich. He basically said, hey, if you want this colony to survive, you need to send people who can build a life here.
Wow, talk about a reality check. So this letter was Jamestown's wake-up call.
You got it.
Yeah.
The Virginia Company, they realized this wasn't about quick riches. They needed to think long-term, and that meant actual work. Which brings us to a very different and honestly much darker chapter in the Jamestown story.
Yeah.
And it's not a happy one.
Because this is where the story shifts. Instead of skilled European labor,
They turned to exploiting African labor. In 1619, just 12 years after Jamestown is founded, a ship arrives near the settlement. And this ship wasn't carrying colonists or craftsmen, it was carrying enslaved Africans. It's a moment that changes everything about American history.
it's tough to hear, honestly. This idea that Jamestown, this quest for a new life, it gets so intertwined with something so awful.
Yeah, and it's impossible to separate it from another big part of the Jamestown story. Tobacco. Remember those early colonists looking for gold? Turns out tobacco was the real treasure.
Right, Virginia and tobacco. But I forget just how much it took over their
It
economy.
was huge. The demand in Europe, it was through the roof. And growing conditions in Virginia, perfect. But here's the thing. cultivating tobacco, back-breaking work, and they needed a lot of labor to keep up.
So it all connects. Those enslaved Africans. It wasn't random. It was tied directly to this tobacco boom. It's like the more desperate they got, the more they turned to exploitation.
It's a tragic pattern. And those inequalities, they were already there right from the start. The gentleman versus everyone else, all this resentment building up. It's no wonder things boiled over eventually.
You're talking about Bacon's Rebellion, 1676. When Jamestown, the symbol of English colonialism, it literally goes up in flames.
Exactly. Now, it starts with conflict with Native Americans on the frontier, which is always more complicated than it seems. But at its core, Bacon's Rebellion was about the haves and the have-nots, those power imbalances, the reliance on forced labor. It all explodes.
So Jamestown's whole story, all these struggles, they lead to this place that was supposed to be a new beginning. It becomes a battleground. Ambition, desperation, the human cost of it all.
And the burning of Jamestown.
Mm.
It's almost poetic. This destructive event that makes you question, what happens when a society is built on such an uneven foundation?
It makes you think. This place had so much promise, but also so much hardship, conflict. So what's left of it today? Can you even visit Jamestown?
You can't exactly walk the streets anymore now. The original settlement, it's an archaeological site now. They're doing incredible work uncovering what's left. And there's a living history museum nearby, too.
So you can actually experience what it was like back there.
They try to give you a sense of it. Yeah, it's really something. You're standing in the same spot as those colonists, thinking about their choices, their legacy. It makes history real. You know, it's not just dates in a book.
It's about understanding that those choices, they still affect us today. We're still dealing with the consequences. Well, on that note, I think we've done our fair share of time traveling for today.
It's been a journey. Always fascinated to dig into these stories.
It really is. And who knows what we'll uncover in our next deep dive. Until then, thanks for listening.